Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the 5E office hours session on connecting with readers in a changing literary marketplace. I'm Judy Sternlight, and I'm joined today by my co-moderator and 5E member, Ann Horowitz. And we have a couple more 5E members, Pat Mulcahy and Jane Rosenman, who are going to come into the program later when we get to the Q&A. I want to say a little bit about 5E for those of you who are joining one of our sessions for the first time. 5E is a small collective of independent book editors with backgrounds at major publishing houses. We were founded 14 years ago, and we each work with clients independently, but we come together for strategy sessions, workshops, panels. We all have deep ties in the literary community, which helps us get really good guests like we have today. Um, and our mission is to help writers, agents, and publishers to get great books out there. So as we get started, if you have questions for our panelists for the first part of this session, can you please throw them into the chat, and then we're saving some time at the end to do Q&A and get to as many of your questions as we can. So, Anne, will you talk about our three wonderful guests?
Yeah, we're so happy to have the three of you here. And I'm going to read a little bit about each guest, but you can find links to their longer, impressive bios in our chat. So Shida Carr is a deputy director of publicity at Simon & Schuster. She began her publishing career with Touchstone, promoting both fiction and nonfiction. She has worked with Charlemagne the God, Harriet Lerner, R.L. Stine, Misty Copeland, Carrie Elwes, Stan Lee, and Cecile Richard. With Atria Books, her New York Times bestselling campaigns include books by Elvis Duran, Rob Kenner, Danny Trejo, Miles Taylor, and many more. She is also spearheading campaigns for Simon & Schuster's Black Privilege publishing imprint, including 2 Chainz' The Voice in My Head is God, and Dawn Staley, Uncommon Favor. Lauren LeBlanc is a writer and editor who has been published in the New York Times Book Review, The Atlantic, Vanity Fair, The Believer, The Drift, The Washington Post, when it still existed, the Boston Globe, and the Los Angeles Times. Before she became an accomplished book critic, she worked in editorial at Knopf, Atlas & Co., and Guernica magazine. She is currently an active board member of the National Book Critics Circle. And finally, Michael Taeckens is both an independent publicist and a literary agent. He's the co-founder of Broadside PR, where his clients have been awarded and shortlisted for numerous prizes, including the Pulitzer, National Book Award, Booker Prize, National Book Critics Circle Award, Penn, Whiting Awards, and many others. 10 of his projects have been featured on the cover of the New York Times Book Review, including books by Namwali Serpell, Abraham Verghese, Tom Perrotta, and Bell Boggs. In 2025, he joined Massie, McQuilkin, and Altman as a literary agent, where he represents a range of literary fiction and narrative nonfiction. So that's our guess. And Judy, do you want to get us going?
Yes, I do. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the state of book reviews. When the Washington Post Book World closed down back in February, it left the New York Times as the only daily paper in the US that had a standalone book section. This sparked a wave of opinion pieces and literary debates about the future of book reviews. So we'd like to start by asking each of you to talk a little about the shifting landscape and your sense of what's going on. And before, I'm going to ask Lauren to speak first, but before that, I forgot to say, let's everyone mute. If you're not talking now, go ahead and mute yourself because otherwise there's too much distortion. So Lauren, I wanted to ask you, as a book critic, can you just talk a little bit about how things have changed between now and a few years ago when you were first starting out?
Well, I have to say, I started out actually writing book reviews for the Times-Picayune in New Orleans in college in 1999, which was a completely different landscape. So I would say things changing within the past couple of years. There is someone who still is not muted. If everybody could try, it's just distracting. Thank you. Right now, I mean, everyone knows the landscape is changing. It's shrinking. I think as a part of my job is to hustle and know what is open, who the editors are, and also be mindful of the fact that these editors are also facing a lot of cuts. Some of them are working part-time. Um, and we have to know their periodicals, what their readership is looking for, what their voice is, in order to pitch them what they need. And that's, I find, is the best way to connect and land pitches, is just to know the landscape of who I'm writing to and what they're looking for. So no one's time is wasted. It's just been a really challenging time, but I have to laugh because I wrote book reviews for a long time, and then when I began to work for Knopf, I stopped writing book reviews for conflict of interest. So that was 2005. And I resumed again when I left working full time in publishing in 2015. And I told myself I would write a book when the work went away, because even in 2015, it seemed as though things were dire. And the work just keeps coming. So it's not a hopeless situation, but it does require a lot of vigilance and knowing the different outlets and what they're looking for. I just find I really depend on well edited, curated features and periodicals and journals to give me a better handle on what the landscape looks like and what I should be reading and what not to miss out on.
And Shida, how about you? How does the book review landscape look different to you now from when you started? And how are those changes feeling for you?
Sure. First, I'll say that I'm so thrilled to be here with the 5E team and my counterparts, Lauren and Michael. I'm thrilled. So, to answer your question, I mean, part of it is just like, well, Lauren just said it best. Like, it requires a lot of vigilance, you know. The loss was obvious, you know, financially, book coverage, jobs. It felt like a piece of culture was lost. Um, I was really struck by the way in terms of like capacity and diversity of publications, you really have to seek that out more. It feels like there's with the shrinking landscape, especially for a publicist, it just feels like there's a void in the community. Like our books we have to work really hard to find the right placement, and that's going to mean that we have to like look under every rock, every corner, you know, everywhere we can to get our books placed in the right space, but also in places where, you know, the daily newspapers, the beauty of them was that they had different audiences. And so you could find something like certain things I might never read, but I saw it in the Washington Post, or I saw it in the AP, or I see it in the New York Times, but it never would strike me to pick up that book. And now we're going to have to find more ways to do that. And we hope that the communities that are left in the media that cover books are willing to broaden outside of what they would typically cover.
Yeah. And Michael, how about you? How does it look different to you now, and how are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I also wanted to say I'm really thrilled and honored to be here. Thank you so much, and especially to be here with Shida and Lauren. I think Shida and Lauren expressed it beautifully. It is more competitive than ever. I don't necessarily want to repeat what Shida and Lauren just said, so I'll, you know, say that I think there's an overall devaluation of cultural criticism in our country right now. It certainly is hitting the literary world, but it extends beyond the literary world. One of the things that is particularly frustrating for me is there's this oft repeated phrase that reviews don't sell books. And even a lot of people in the literary world, in the publishing industry, say this. And it really bothers me on two different levels. One, reviews do not exist. Criticism does not exist to sell books. That's a wonderful byproduct of criticism, but that's not the sole reason or the chief reason that book reviews exist. But two, reviews do sell books. You can talk to any independent bookseller. You can talk to, libraries have to buy books. You can talk to librarians about people who come in and say, I read a review here or there, and I'd like to buy this book. I'd like to put this book on hold, what have you. But things have certainly gotten infinitely more competitive as the number of places that review books has shrunk significantly.
Yeah. So when we talk about the books coverage, there's obviously a range of different kinds of books coverage, ranging from lighter fare, like, lists of recommended titles and, author Q&As or profiles or interviews, to shorter reviews, to, longer thought-provoking critical reviews. And when we say that, there's been a gutting, the thing that feels most endangered is that longer form critical engagement. So one of the things we were wondering is, where is that still happening? What are some of your favorite places to go that are still publishing those types of really engaging critical takes on books that are coming out now? And that's a question for all three of you.
I mean, I can say that I think I this past year was the co-chair of the McQuilkin Award for Excellence in Reviewing for the National Book Critics Circle. And that's an award that is open to anyone who's a member of the organization. It's not based on nomination. It's not curated. Anyone can apply with their work up to 5,000 words. And I had to read over 60 applications. And I found the most impressive pieces came to me from overall, I mean, people who are on staff, people who can write 5,000 words for the London Review of Books. Bless you. You are a very fortunate soul. But not everyone has that kind of time to write and to research, and also not everyone has the time to read that much. I find bang for your buck, the Boston Globe has amazing 800 to 900 word reviews that Kate Tuttle consistently pulls from interesting writers, a variety of them, and has a real keen eye for what's going on. But I find, there's a lot of places doing great work. I've been writing for The Believer, and they're writing one-page reviews in the back of their book. The Drift is doing terrific work with both interviews, their mentions, and also longer essays. So they're very committed to criticism. And those literary journals continue to be a place where curation is happening, editorial input is happening, there's a collective conversation happening around the work. It's not simply Substack where you're reading the unfiltered thoughts of writers who are eager to find a place to put their writing, but aren't either because of timing, networking, etc., aren't landing reviews in outlets. And I just think there's a lot out there, and you'd be surprised. You could get a cheap subscription and find yourself discovering things that you wouldn't otherwise find, which I think is the beauty of the reviews in daily papers.
I actually have a question about Substack, but I want to ask Michael and Shida first if they want to add anything about places where great coverage is still happening that they would direct us to.
Yeah, Shida, would you like to go?
Sure. It takes me a minute to unmute myself. I'm the slowest unmuter. I agree with everything that Lauren said. And I still go to places like Art Fuse as well, like the New Yorker. Boston Globe is really, really great. So yeah, I think that's in Plowshare's Paris Review, like some of those literary publications. I go to those places to see content and reviews.
And I will second what Shida and Lauren said about the Boston Globe. I think Kate Tuttle does a great job of not only selecting what titles to cover, but also reaching out to a diverse array of critics to review books there. It's always consistently smart books coverage. Other places that I really love, Book Forum. I think the New Yorker always does stellar books criticism. It's really exciting to me that Becca Rothfield is writing for them now. The New York Review of Books. I think New York Magazine slash Vulture does interesting stuff. The Guardian. I'm a big fan of Caitlin Greenidge at Harper's Bazaar. She started a books newsletter recently where she interviews different authors. She's always doing really interesting stuff with authors and books, and she herself is an author. The Nation, I think, consistently has excellent literary criticism. I also just wanted to mention that the National Book Critics Circle, if people aren't a member, I would encourage you to sign up to be a member. And they send out, I think, every Monday morning a weekly digest of the various books criticism that various NBCC members do. And there are often lots of places in there that do excellent books criticism. And it's just a nice way to see, what does the landscape look like from, the typical players like the New York Times, but also to some of the smaller outlets that are doing really important, serious coverage.
Thank you. That's such a great roundup from the three of you of places that are still publishing this kind of work.
I know, it's really hopeful.
It does sound hopeful. I mean, we've lost, local newspapers in large part, but this kind of work is still getting published. I did want to, go ahead, Lauren.
I thank you, Michael, for plugging the NBCC Critical Notes is the name of the newsletter. And Michael Schaub, who's a critic based out of Texas, does a really terrific job with it. It's also a really wonderful way if you're curious to see what are places that cover books that are like the books you are writing or, your clients, and to guide those people to the places where they should go. And also to get a sense of the breadth of critics as well, what they're covering too. So again, you're getting a better, more honed sense of what everybody's looking for.
Thank you. Lauren brought up Substack in kind of a negative light, and I just want to go back to that for a minute. Maybe we can talk about Substack for just a little bit. It's interesting because when I was preparing for this panel, I found a lot of discourse on Substack. I was using Substack a lot to think about this topic. So it can definitely be helpful. And I was wondering if maybe the three of you would comment on sort of the pros and cons of Substack as a locus for this type of critical discourse, your thoughts about how it works and how useful it is and the drawbacks. I don't know who wants to start.
I mean, I can respond to that being negative. I shouldn't be so negative, but I find it's just a very overwhelming landscape. I think I miss the days of knowing that there was an editor who was making the decisions ahead of time for me, and I could go to one place and hear a variety of voices. Going to Substack is just, it can be daunting, and I think the quality varies depending on who you're following. Someone like Alex Chi is always going to write a beautiful essay, is always going to offer terrific suggestions, and isn't going to write too long. I go back to it only because it's very hard to kind of harness your attention these days for lots of reasons. But I, as a reviewer and a critic, want to make sure I make ample time for my reading and to read above and beyond. So if I'm having to scramble around and read a bunch of Substacks on top of things, instead of just knowing I can go to one place or a number of trusted sources, it leaves me with less time to read.
Michael,
yeah, I would agree with every single thing that Lauren said. But in terms of being a publicist, I like the widening of a landscape. I like being able to pitch someone. The ones that I really like are Ron Charles. I think he's hilarious. I love Jessica Gross. I think she's really thoughtful and critical about what she writes and does. But I also love that the Substacks, as a publicist, I love that the Substacks are targeted. There's music Substacks. There's Substacks about all kinds of things. And at Atria, I work on a variety of sort of sub imprints, which means a variety of books. And I'm able to go to different spaces with books that the mainstream would not necessarily cover. But it has more of an opportunity in a very targeted Substack for placement.
And Michael, Oh, sorry. I was going to say, feel free to weigh in on Substack if you want, but I wanted to circle back to something. Um, I loved hearing the three of you talk about all these really good substantive sources for, book reviews now. And it's really good to hear about what the National Book Critics Circle is doing. Um, I wanted to ask, are there good efforts underway to support traditional book coverage? And, one example is, Michael, you're involved with something called Viva la Book Review, and I would love for you to touch on what that is.
Sure. Yeah. Viva la Book Review is a relatively new organization that started to try to revive books criticism, relay the importance of books criticism, help literary critics. Find places to review books, just kind of a way to amplify the world of literary criticism. And it's essentially an all volunteer group of various people from different sectors. There are literary agents, Helene, the former director of Beacon Press, is one of the co-founders of it. Uh, Publicists, editors, etc. Everybody who sees that books criticism is essential not only for the literary world but for a healthy democracy that appreciates the arts essentially. Um, I do wish that there were more billionaires like Mackenzie Bezos who saw the benefit of, you know, uh, healthily supporting whatever the case might be. When Jeff Bezos initially bought the Washington Post, everybody was really excited because you may remember the intention was that they were going to expand the book's coverage at the Washington Post Book World, which they did do. They put together an amazing team of people led by John
Yeah,
Williams, who
John Williams,
yeah,
wonderful. Yeah.
John is one of the best in the business, just really sharp, exquisite literary taste, and also just a very kind person. Um, so it was dismaying to see the Post shut down the book world, especially considering it would have been the equivalent of half a penny for Bezos to continue, financially supporting it. So I find a real uh, dearth of people, doing things to support literary criticism, and my hope is that more people will step in. I will say that, The Atlantic is financially supported by somebody who is quite wealthy, and The Atlantic has, a really robust group of literary critics and literary editors, and in fact, they snapped up two of the people from the Washington Post. Sophia Wynn, who was a publishing reporter at the Washington Post, and I'm forgetting. I feel like there was somebody else. Lauren and Shida, do you know? Was there somebody else from the Washington Post that is now at the Atlantic?
I'm trying to remember. I'll look it up and
They
see.
picked up a number of reporters in general, but I can't
Right.
remember
Yeah.
who's book focused. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's exciting to see that as other places are shrinking their books coverage, certain places, the New Yorker, the Atlantic, et cetera, are beefing up their literary coverage.
So, just to put a button on this, this is a group of people in the session today. We as readers, we as publishing people, what can we be doing more things to, help fight the good fight and keep getting more attention to book reviews? Is it supporting, the National Book Critics Circle and, the initiative that Michael, you're describing? What can we do to help? Any of the three of you?
I
Um,
mean, Well,
Sorry, I just wanted to very quickly say, and then I'll let Lauren and Shida talk, that I think joining the NBCC is great. I really urge people to subscribe to
Mhm.
publications. It's one of the most powerful things you can do. And I'm not talking about just, like The Guardian does excellent literary coverage, both in the UK and in the US. I think, and they're also doing excellent news coverage. And I think, you know, financially supporting journalism helps support criticism and helps the literary community overall. But even places like Poets and Writers Magazine is such an essential resource and is a really great uh, guidebook, as it were, for any writer. I mean, you will learn so much from subscribing to that magazine, but also subscribing to literary journals, literary magazines. Lauren mentioned The Drift earlier. So I encourage people to help support financially.
Um,
thank you, Michael. I was gonna add that the NBCC, in addition to the critical notes and just what we do for awards, has a very active and robust membership Slack. They also, which is a great place to find, people in the community. You can get involved in prizes. The Barrios Prize for Translation, the John Leonard Prize for First Book, are prizes that the jury is composed of people who are from the membership if they want to participate. Um, there's also I was going to say. Anyway, there's events that happens through membership that is exclusive to membership that are programmed for members. But yes, I'm 100% subscribing and putting your money where your mouth is. And yes, like journalism alone is going to feed better criticism. I would say The Believer is also, I mentioned them before, but they create long form nonfiction work. It's a dynamic and entertaining magazine. It's a beautiful object. I mean, I find the things that I read are the things that I want to pick up. And I think that I go to that over. That's also my feeling against Substack is like, I really want something that I'm going to be able to pick up and put around and share with someone else. So I think if we value those things, if they're important to us, then we need to buy them. We can't just be sad when they go away and participate in a fundraiser. We have to participate and subscribe now.
That's great advice, and it is something we can all do. We can all get one or two more really good subscriptions.
okay, well, let's pivot a little bit from the sense of loss to what publishing is doing now to adapt. And maybe this is a question for both publicists, and maybe we'll start with Shida. Um, when you're fashioning a publicity campaign now, how does it look different now than it did maybe 10 years ago? And to what extent are you looking for book reviews, and to what extent are you looking for other ways to bring thoughtful attention to books? So maybe Shida, you could talk a little bit about how publicity campaigns have changed lately.
Yeah, for sure. They have changed a lot in the last 10, 15 years. I mean, when I started out, it was very traditional. It was very much like the formats are broadcast, radio, and like online. There were no podcasts, right? So the landscape has includes all of the traditional media, but it also encompasses podcasts. And the reason why podcasts are so important is because they're just longer format. What you can't do in a morning show spot on radio and a morning TV spot in 4 minutes, you can have a longer, more in-depth
Sorry.
conversation on a podcast. And that's why they're so important and why they have such they resonate with people is because of that. Substacks, social media, all of that stuff really didn't exist, and all of it has become really important. So I used to say that I'm trying to build three-dimensional campaigns, but I'm actually now, doing more than that. I am trying to build campaigns that are multi-purpose, that I'm trying to meet people where they are in the different formats that they are in every single way that I have just named. But also, we also at Simon and Schuster, we also have a marketing team. So part of that marketing team is also the book talkers, the influencers, like all of that stuff matters And some books lend themselves to that more than others. But I mean, we in-house, I think we still get really excited about book reviews because we know the importance of book reviews. We know how they can elongate a campaign, and that's important to us. So any way in which we can do that, it always matters. It's always important.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, Shida, that was expressed really beautifully. Thank you for that. I second everything Shida said. You know, it's funny because 10, 15 years ago, we were also bemoaning the state of books criticism at that time because it was so different from 10 to 15 years previous to that. Um, but it does feel like everything has been not only balkanized, but it's really been atomized. And it's much more competitive to get a review in the New York Times today than it was 10 or 15 years ago, because they don't review as many books as they were doing as they had been 10 or 15 years ago. But on the positive side, as Shida mentioned, there are, a countless number of podcasts as well as a countless number of newsletters. And so I see a lot of positivity and optimism there. There are so many different places you can reach out to. As Shida mentioned, you can get really granular. There are, very specific podcasts and newsletters. I did just want to give a shout out to some of the podcasts that I think do really extraordinary work. Tracy Thomas is the host of a podcast called The Stacks, and it's just really top-notch interviews with authors. I think she has really wonderful literary taste. She also appears fairly regularly on NPR affiliates to talk about recent books and forthcoming books. There's a podcast called Fiction/Nonfiction that's really great. David Naimon, Naimon, does a wonderful literary podcast called Between the Covers that he's been doing for years. Thresholds, Book Riot has a number of podcasts. They also have a variety of newsletters that are just filled with robust books content. Jason Blitman has a podcast called Gaze Reading that's really fun. There's another podcast called Brett's Book Stack. So, those are all exciting opportunities that we didn't have 10 to 15 years ago.
I'd
All
like to
right.
respond to something someone's asked about feeling that the solution is not encouraging membership from people who are in a challenged financial situation. I'll say this, those philanthropic members you're talking about are going to look at numbers. And if they don't see a readership and they don't see subscription numbers, they're not going to fund a magazine. And there are so many different ways to get involved. And there are so many different, you can ask your library to subscribe to journals. You can, and a lot of these places, including the NBCC, will have sliding scale rates for memberships, for subscriptions. What you need to do is ask. And I think those opportunities are out there for people to have access. It just requires a little extra work. But I think that those opportunities are out there. And unfortunately, the reality is that there's no silver bullet. There's no perfect billionaire who's going to come in and save us. So advocating for those individuals to come in and fund these places when they don't see the numbers to support a thriving literary community, when people aren't involved, that's just not going to happen. Which is another reason why I think, getting involved in Slack and finding communities and building out your own opportunities. I know a lot of people in the community who've created their own writing groups or reading series at a local bookstore. They would be thrilled to have someone come in and help them create programming that are going to get people into a store or a library. Those are opportunities you have to create community and to find others. And maybe you'll find people with all that great financial support, but those things don't come out of nowhere. And those people are always looking for bottom lines as well. So there's a reality to all of this that unfortunately circles back to numbers and metrics. And it's another reason why I think continual support. Just find places you love, and write them a letter. You never know what's going to turn out. And I think um, despairing about the state of things is just that's part of it too. It's like I got into being involved with the NBCC on the board level because I was tired of complaining about the state of reviewing and criticism and book publishing. And I feel like being a part of the solution by getting involved in meeting others was a terrific way to combat the despair of it.
I just wanted to respond to Laura's comment as well. I was one of those MFA students who was in very serious debt. And I also worked two different jobs while I was all through undergrad and grad school years. So I am sensitive to this issue. I wasn't, as Lauren said, it's not a silver bullet solution. But I think for people who are financially strapped in that way, I went to the library and checked out, as many literary journals as I could. Um, I got my MFA in poetry. I would go to the library and request certain books that I knew were forthcoming. And then I would try to subscribe to, even if it was just one literary magazine, some of these places you can subscribe for literally $10 or $20 for an entire year. And that can make a big difference. But I did want to say that that's not the only solution that I was thinking of. It's just one of, many different ideas.
It's great that we've already dived into the Q&A. Let's do it formally. Thank you. Thank you guys for being so incredibly articulate today. And
But
for,
also, I just want to add too, if you have membership with the NBCC, we offer a lot of breaks on subscriptions for different places too. Again, it's not the only solution, but there are workarounds that do exist. Just have to dig to find them, but they are there. And I am sympathetic. I too had a graduate degree that I needed to pay off, undergraduate loans, worked in publishing, which is not, I had many, many roommates into my 30s. But I think that we can't wait for someone else to save us. We have to be the ones to save ourselves. So in different ways, in different fashions. And that's why finding community and doing it collectively is probably the best possible solution.
thank you, Lauren and Michael. And Laura for raising a challenging question. All right, so let's turn to the Q&A now. And I want to say again that we have two more 5E members, Patricia Mulcahy and Jane Rosenman, who are going to lead us into looking at some of the questions that have been coming up. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
The first one, there are a lot of interesting items in the chat, but I wanted just to mention one that's so recent. Lauren, you talked about Slack, and one of the participants today wants to have a little more discussion about that. How do you get involved in Slack? Could you give a little more concrete information?
I mean, I can only speak for the Slack that happens within the NBCC, but we have a membership Slack that people participate in. I don't participate in it because I have too many other things that I have to do, and I'm on the board. So I manage the NBC. My efforts are directed towards the board and my reading committees and my service committee responsibilities. But that's one of the benefits of membership is that you have access to this Slack where you're going to find other people who share your opinions, you're pooling resources, you're pooling information, you're trying to find out who are the editors who are looking for work, and you can be able to find others who do what you do. So.
Thank you a
That's
lot.
the thing about participating. When I worked at Guernica, which was a volunteer-based organization, we also had Slack. There's Slack just pops up where, the work happens, right? I think it's a vehicle for communication and for sharing resources. So if you are involved in some kind of community effort or you are involved in a magazine, they're going to have a work Slack that's going to be a space for you to speak out, find your people, etc.
Um, Somebody mentioned here in the chat the Rumpus, which I just wanted to say the Rumpus is an excellent literary website. It's now owned by Roxane Gay and her wife, Debbie Millman, and it's always been great. Roxane and Debbie, I think, have injected a new level of energy and enthusiasm into it. And um, uh, I think sites like this are really also essential to the literary culture. It's if anybody is looking to publish original creative work or criticism, it's a great place to look to. I also think the website Electric Literature is really great. They're doing really good stuff. Um, Los Angeles Review of Books is having some issues right now, but they've done really wonderful criticism as well. So, um, supporting those kinds of places by reading them and also submitting work to them is very helpful.
We had some earlier questions, guys, about strategies and ideas for promoting books a year after launch. I know it's hard enough to get coverage for things just when they come out, but are there any follow-up routines you would suggest to people who want to continue having their book out there?
I can take this question first. So there are publications outlets, media outlets that do like a paperback roundup. So that's one thing that I always say to authors. The other thing that I say is there something timely that relates to your book that maybe you can write like an original essay um, for the book and we can get it published and just re-gearing up and doing radio and podcasts. So I think the traditional media effort is also great, but if you also extend it with an op-ed, an original op-ed that somehow relates to current events or something timely in your book, that also works to get some coverage.
Some pickup.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to respond to that?
I just added in the chat that I think LitHub is a terrific outlet for that, where if you are finding yourself with, yeah, there's a timely element to a book of yours that is outside of the conventional publishing schedule, um, they would more likely than not be open to something like that.
Yeah, the chat is really excellent today. If some people are not looking at the chat,
Yeah.
Michael and Lauren in particular are putting a lot of good things in there. I put in about LitHub. I love LitHub. I always look at their bookmarks. They have rave, positive. They almost never say negative, but they do give you links to the underlying reviews if you want to see why something got a rave or maybe did not.
It's a
So there's
terrific aggregator for seeing who what gets reviewed where, and it will help you kind of narrow things out and also see the way the books are being discussed.
exactly. There's another question here from someone whose writing is at the intersection of speculative and literary fiction, and the narrative center on Black queer women. What advice do you have for navigating the publishing landscape and building an audience for that particular kind of work?
Um, I think, well, I know that the intersection of literary and speculative um, uh, has really been part of the zeitgeist for a few years now. So that's a great thing going for you. Um, there are a number of places that are very supportive of and promote quite a lot. Uh, Queer speculative literature. I had mentioned Book Riot earlier. Book Riot does a really excellent job of that. Also, the places I just mentioned, the Rumpus, Electric Literature, but also you will see coverage of books like that in some mainstream places. The New York Times, regularly reviews queer lit. They've also amped up their coverage of sci-fi and fantasy books. I think the most important thing that writers can do to try to get awareness for their work is to get your name out there. Submit your work for publication, not only your creative work, but also, as Shida mentioned earlier, do you have any essay ideas? And if so, where can you publish those essays? I feel I'm of two minds about social media, but it can be really helpful. I think mostly not as a one-way promotional tool where all you're doing is talking about yourself and your work, but engaging in communication with other people in the literary community. What other queer speculative writers are on social media? Are you engaged with them? The writer Kelly Link is, and I should mention Alex G also, are both on Blue Sky, which is not as popular as Twitter was, but there is a very active literary community on there. And Kelly and Alex consistently boost other writers pretty much on a daily basis. A number of the writers are speculative writers, a number of them are queer writers. So there are places out there that will be very eager to lift you up and help talk about your work.
Several people have asked about if you're being published at a place like She Writes Press, which is a hybrid, and they don't supply a publicist, how can a writer individually reach out to some of these wonderful podcasts and so forth that you guys are talking about? Are there particular strategies so you don't get lost in the, just a huge volume of things coming into to those outlets?
I don't know. Yeah, that's
We
that's a,
stumped the
I just
panel.
want to know.
Sorry, I
Um,
was looking for the unmute
yeah.
button.
Okay, Michael, you can take it, or Shida, please, because I mean, I have ideas, but I'm kind of shooting in the dark.
It's a little bit of a tricky situation only because traditionally people in the media landscape do not want to hear directly from authors. I do think that that has changed, especially with podcasts and newsletters. I think it's absolutely fine. Um, the whole trick for it, I think, is and crafting the pitch. The number one rule when you're emailing anybody is to keep in mind that these people are getting anywhere from a dozen to literally 100, 200 pitches a day. It's really, really overwhelming. And Lauren had talked about this eloquently at the top of this Zoom. When I'm pitching to people, I'm always keeping in mind that these are people who are spread very thin. They're getting hit up constantly, and I keep in mind what kinds of books do they traditionally cover? What are they interested in? So, uh, if you are writing, say, um, a work that I'll go back to the previous writer that is sci-fi, fantasy, speculative. You're not going to want to pitch to podcasts that have never covered those kinds of writers. The good news is, you can do research to find out what kinds of podcasts do cover those kinds of books. And um, for that kind of media, it's absolutely okay for you to reach out on your own. Somebody had mentioned in the chat hiring an independent publicist is expensive, and it's true. The rates vary widely, just as in any trade. I mean, if you hire a house painter or an interior designer or a plumber, you can get three different rates that are, vary wildly. So there are some publicists that will do individualized campaigns, specific campaigns. You can hire somebody to focus exclusively on podcasts and newsletters, or you can hire somebody to focus exclusively on quote unquote traditional media while you yourself pitch to podcasts and newsletters. So there are options out there.
That's great, Michael. I didn't know you could do that, that you could,
Yeah,
pitch
that's
to
very
certain
helpful.
outlets and pay only for that. It sounds very practical.
Shida, can you say something about what it's like to work with, you're an in-house high up a publicity person. Can you just say something about what it's like to work with an author who also has a person, freelance doing their publicity? I'm just curious. Does that work smoothly?
It works very smoothly in most cases. I have several projects this year alone because I've dealt with quite a few celebrity authors will often hire outside publicists, and that's just because they've been working with that outside publicist for a duration of their career, etc. But yeah, it works very smoothly, and the key to that is communication. At the very top, the key is communication. Sometimes we divide up the work. And I think Michael can also speak to this as well. Sometimes we divide up the work. I'm always of the belief that I can't go to my boss and say that I divided up the work. So I still do the work, right? And because maybe they get fired mid campaign and I never pitched broadcast, right? So I don't do that. I tend to still do my job, but the key to it is communication, and making sure what they need. And a lot of the value in that is that they know the author better than I do. I've been with them for 5 months, but they likely know the author because they have been spending time and been PR over years or months or whatever. So there is a lot of value to that. I also think that the collaborative effort of being able to pitch and like think critically about the different ways that we can publicize the book is also really helpful, and to be able to bounce ideas off one another. That's what you get when you have someone who has been hired to sort of support you, or you support them on a campaign.
We have a couple more things in the chat to cover in the time that we have left. Natasha, one of the participants, says that she went to the AWP Writers Conference and heard a lot of panels of podcasters who prefer to amplify individual writers. So again, it's about networking. You have to really get around and see what information you can pick up, whether it's at a neighborhood bookstore event or something like AWP, where you have so many resources compounded into one, arena. And another participant wants to hear responses to a question posed earlier. How do mid-list and independent press authors break through the noise when a lot of reviewers and book review editors seem to focus on lead titles, and ignore everything else?
Um, I think that is, I, I would argue with that notion. Are there certain books that are published each year that tend to get reviewed in a lot of different places? Yes, that's going to inevitably happen. But I'm telling you that if you look at the New York Times, at the New Yorker, at the New York Review of Books, any of these mainstream places, they are covering books that not everyone else is covering. I mean, James Wood just wrote a very long review of a book that I hadn't seen reviewed in other places, at the New Yorker. I myself have worked at smaller presses. I've been on my own now for 13 years or so. But before that, I was at Grey Wolf Press, which is a smaller nonprofit press, and we saw our books covered by mainstream media quite often, actually. So I think it's something that is repeated a lot on social media, but I've been doing publicity for 25 years, and I'm telling you, I regularly see mid-list authors and authors who publish with smaller presses who are reviewed by mainstream media and smaller media.
I think the Believer is actually exclusively reviewing small presses. They give a lot of time and effort to find work that is being published by small presses. So in no way is that a detriment. And I think a lot of ways it's a great way to build yourself as a writer is to start at a small press. The worst thing that can happen is what seems like your dream situation where you get an enormous contract from a corporate house and then you are forgotten and or your book just simply doesn't meet the moment, right? Or the moment doesn't meet your book and find you the right alchemy. But if you're in a small press, you can build up a readership that way. And I know it's really hard to hear that when one would want to have and take the bigger contract for reasons of finances. But writing, it's none of us are in this for the money. And so I think if you're looking for long-term strategies, again, there's no silver bullet, I think, but these paths of trying to find sustainable ways to build a career is a better way to channel your energy and to think and work most efficiently at maintaining a career in writing, especially given one's love of it and the desire to be a part of this environment.
I also just wanted to add very quickly, sorry, Shida. There are countless stories of publishers who, put a lot, marketing, publicity, everything behind certain books that end up not getting reviewed very much. And then there are books that kind of come out of nowhere that get reviewed a lot. I think the thing that is really important to state is that the vast majority of books that are published do not get a lot of media attention. And that is true for books that sell for very big advances. It's true for books that sell for medium amounts and for lower advances. And it's a numbers game. There are a huge number of books that are published any given week, and only a very small percentage of them get review coverage. So I do empathize with writers. I just want people to know that it's not unique to those who publish with smaller presses or to mid-list authors.
Shida, did you
The only thing that I would add is I would say craft more than one pitch. When you are talking to folks and the various media outlets that they're mainstream or they're fringe or they're literary, craft more than one pitch. And that's a better way to get into some of these areas. But I agree with everything that Lauren and Michael said.
Well, we're going to let Shida have the last word because it's time to say goodbye. Thank you guys so much. Lauren, Shida, Michael, and Pat, Jane, everyone who came today, thank you so much and wrote good questions. This was a really good conversation. I just want to mention that on June 11th, 5E has another panel coming up. It's an agent roundtable with Annie Huang, Wendy Sherman, and Renee Zuckerbrot, and it's going to be really good. So if you haven't signed up yet, go to the website, sign up. So everybody, thank you so much for coming today.
We're going to be posting our recording of this session on our website sometime within the next couple of weeks, if anybody wants to share or view this panel again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you
So much, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.